Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, Let's Clear the Air, a playbook to prevent school closures by keeping indoor air clean. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am the editor-at-large for eSchool News, and I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's event is brought to you by Trox. For nearly 40 years, Trox has championed the use of technology to broaden access and improve learning. Trox partners with educators across North America in the planning, purchasing, deployment, and use of technology in pursuit of better access and improved learning outcomes for students of all ages. Before we get into our conversation, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features of our platform here that we'll be using. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides and other resources. You can submit questions at any time for the panelists during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end of the presentation for our speakers to address those questions. Also, we have a chat function you can launch by clicking on it. Feel free to use this one to contact someone from the eSchool News team if you have a technical question, but please leave the Q&As for the panelists specifically in the Q&A box. Also, we have a closed caption option that's available by clicking on that. So with these housekeeping items out of the way, let's kind of get started with our conversation here. First, I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Brooke Pitcher. Brooke is the Facilities Director for Marin County Day School, where he currently oversees all property and building operations on their 35-acre campus. He is also a licensed contractor with over 25 years experience in multi-unit operations, project management, and business development in commercial, educational, government, and residential environments. Next, we have Kelly Hayes. Kelly is the air purification specialist at Surgically Clean Air. For over 5 years, she has made medical grade pure air more accessible across schools, corporations, and even sports teams. Clean Air Kelly, as she is known today, was also a former Team USA Ice Hockey Prize goaltender. And last, but certainly not least, Odelia. Odelia Gratch is the director for the health and safety portfolio at Trox. For over 20 years, she has been helping organizations make informed technology investment decisions. In her day job, Odelia partners with school administrators to create a safe environment for learning. So with that, Odelia, maybe I'll pass it off to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And welcome everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. We know how important clean indoor air is in today's trying times, with risks like the virus and wildfire smoke and now stepping into flu season, which is why we wanted to have this conversation with you. We have some great content and wonderful speakers lined up, and I hope that you leave this presentation with some actionable tips that can help you keep your school family safe. And back to you, Kevin.
Odelia, thanks. At this point, it's really important for our conversation, I think, to have the audience be involved. So we want to ask you a few questions as well that might help the panelists understand the concerns that you may have and why you're here with us today. So Chris, if you could launch that first poll. Have you done anything to change your air purification system in the last 2 years? So I know, unfortunately, we continue to have to deal with COVID-19 and the impact that it's had on schools, and certainly everyone has made air and air purification something that is top of the docket when it comes to management of buildings. So I can probably guess the over/under to this question as it comes through. We'll see if we have any answers that come up. So we have 60% no to 40% yes. So that is something that is kind of interesting to me. So I'm glad that folks are on this conversation. And Kelly, I think your job is to answer the folks who have said no, and the 40% who said yes, to see if that's the right way to go. So over to you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Kevin. Just wanted to thank everyone for being with us today as we dig into this very important topic And just had Kevin had mentioned, I had the honor to be a Team USA athlete, and kind of taking a bigger look at what's been happening with the situation during 2020 and now into 2021. And the lessons that I learned from that time as being a competitive athlete is the key to success was really eliminating distractions. And so when we take this and we look at what's happened with school systems over this last 20 months, the same applies here, is really what can we do to eliminate the distractions, whether it's fear and reduce anxieties, and what needs to happen to let people perform at their best. So very similar type relationship in what we could do. And so the key thing really is taking a look at the air quality. Obviously, a tremendous amount of changes have gone on during this crazy time. And that's where we take a look at some of the standings that we see here listed by the EPA. There's kind of two ways to looking at this. It's sort of like overall air quality and what it means to us sort of day in, day out. So looking at the air quality risks on, again, more of a regular day type situation, from environmental health to pollutants. We can see the standings here. Then also focusing on those with respiratory situations like asthma is highly apparent. But we're seeing a growing impact of things like chemical sensitivity, general allergies from external factors in the air, but then also into special situations depending upon where you are, whether it be smoke or allergy plumes and those types of things. So going on to the next slide. And this is where the focus is really intensified when you start to look at the risks and the intensification of those risks. So obviously, sort of the elephant in the room, if we will, is the COVID-19 situation. I used to have to spend a lot of time educating about the health risks that were, apparent in indoor air situations, often not visible. But with COVID-19 now across the board, the level of awareness is very high. And people are highly attentive to this situation. And with this, I think it is going to stay with us for quite some time. Like it's just made this whole plume of thinking about what goes into our body. So obviously, healthy food, healthy water, healthy air. And of all those activities, air is the number one constant necessity. But again, looking at the regular everyday irritants, we have the list here, from headaches to eye irritation, allergic reactions, and such. And so people might have been experiencing these regular day-to-day irritants, but now with the intensified need of the COVID-19 situation, again, we've seen an elevation to that attentiveness. So looking into the next slide, we can cite some experts here. So the EPA and the CDC are, again, well publicized right now. And the CDC especially is the one that I focus on a lot and their findings. I could talk on this slide for a long time, but kind of breaking down the consistencies of what we see in each of these summaries from each of these organizations, the key to protecting health. And again, whether we're looking at a pandemic situation or just everyday health factors, is the key is air movement, your capture of aerosols and particulate that relates directly to your HEPA, and the denaturing of the germs and viruses. And again, that brings down to your UVC. And something that's not listed here that is extremely important is also the key when you're in classroom situations is sound level. So again, the aerosol and particulate capture, the denaturing of germ and viruses, and making sure it fits into your lifestyle and what you're trying to achieve in the classroom. I did want to touch in a little bit of each sort of like the key words here. And again, if people have questions with this, it'd be a great time to key into the questions and we could take a look at them individually. But HVAC is a common used term right now in looking at your air movement. And I always say HVAC is a great start. Again, you'll have all sorts of different situations in different schools, but what you need to know about your HVAC system is what is in your HVAC. So quite often you will have some sort of HEPA filtration. The general purpose of it back in the day was to capture, outside irritants that might be flowing in as you rotate your outdoor air to your indoor air. So in that's where the word MERV has now come into it, because the MERV relates to the particulate size down to the micron level of what your HEPA can capture. So sometimes it sounds complicated when we put it all together, but again, breaking it down is really taking a look at the capabilities of your HVAC and is it capturing what it's trying to capture. And then the next key to focus on is really your UVC. So again, that's the denaturing or delaminating of the germs and viruses. The whole list is actually germs, viruses, bacteria, and fungus, including mold. So the key here is not only to have UVC or UV light, but is also to have the C. And the C is the designation that gets into the germicidal level. So you hear in the CDC as their item number 3, that is really the key, is the power of the capture, and then also the capture of the denaturing of what the UVC can do. And again, I have to say it again, just because I've been in so many classrooms and so many school situations, is that sound level is important. We often say in the air industry is that an air purifier or HVAC system that's that loud, it does not work. And often people are like, well, why? Why is that? And because simply somebody's going to turn it off. So totally taking away from its function. Looking into the next slide, when we take a look at the Harvard Healthy Building Programs, again, this is a strong list here. I think many of these factors have been looked at relating into the same 4 keys. But these strategies mentioned have been covered by the funding programs and continue to be supported by government funding. Programs like the CARES Act have been really, really impactful. And they continue again to go in to make changes at the school level, all focusing on the health and safety of the teachers and the students. So again, this has helped with so many school systems thus far, and it continues to be a strong program. So going on to looking at your overall indoor air quality evaluation guide, into our next slide. Again, well aware of everybody's in a unique situation. For myself personally, I've been working with schools that were farmhouses converted into schools, which was a beautiful setting, by the way, to high rises in the city. So everybody's going to have their own sort of situation that they're dealing with, but the keys are the same. So again, really breaking it down, when you're taking a look at your own situation, is your air movement. So again, your ACH, your air changes per hour, your capture, your HEPA, which relates to your MERV rating. And again, your UV for the denaturing of the germs and viruses, and making sure that the UV has the strength and the power of the C, which is the germicidal definition there. And again, that it fits into your lifestyle and what you're trying to achieve, which comes down to a low sound level, easy to use, and easy to care for over time. So those are really the things that sort of summarize through all these stages of what schools need to look at to evaluate where they fit into the overall health and wellness. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone for attending with us, and really just comment. We are here to help in whatever way we can. And with that, Kevin, I'll turn it back to you.
Kelly, thanks very much. A lot of stuff in there that we can unpack over the course of the next hour, I'm sure. Before we get into talking with Brooke, we have another poll question we like to throw out to the audience. So at what level would you grade the indoor quality of the air in your school at the present time? I know, Kelly, to some of your points, in a lot of the schools that I've been in as well, and it kind of comes into it. There's some digital equity issues that sometimes pop up with that, especially when it comes to the use of technology in schools, and a lot of school districts will say, we still have asbestos pipes wrapped
Yes.
around our basements. We can't go for the 5G, right? So,
Right.
we are going to get into the nitty gritty and some of the day-to-day realities of the science that you were talking about with. I'm sorry, I'm just looking some questions coming in already here. Well, do we have the results for poll number 2? No, well, once we get them, we'll certainly get onto them. But in the meantime, Brooke, thank you so much for joining us today.
No
As
problem.
I just mentioned to Kelly, we just got a lot of science there, right? A lot of big picture, a lot of issues that maybe historically might not have been something that you would have thought of or had to have dealt with in the past. I know, and we'll get into some of the other particulars of where you are in California, but before the pandemic, air purification might have been a nice to have and not a reality. And unfortunately, starting in March 2020, it became front and center. Maybe we can start, and I hate to talk about it, tired of talking about it, but here we are. Maybe take us back to, from BP before the pandemic to where you found yourself back when COVID hit us all.
Okay. I mean, just for the group, I'm a private school, K through 8, 35 acres, 25 buildings on campus, and about 600 students, 170-ish faculty, staff members. Air quality was always a concern, especially school's been here since 1957. So some of those buildings are still the original buildings are on campus, and yet we have buildings also that we just built that are brand new. They're less than 2 years old. So we have quite a degree of aging buildings across campus. So air quality, especially in the older buildings, before the building science wasn't necessarily a thing back then. You just made a box with a door, some windows. And so we discussed it frequently, but it was always sort of a secondary discussion where it was something that we talked about, but it was never on the forefront as far as an urgency concern. And then obviously, like everybody else, pandemic hits and we are swamped. Everyone had questions. How does this spread? How is it going? Is it surfaces? Is it, in the air? Everyone was scared to death and, just biblical proportions, got dogs and cats living together. It's crazy. So anyways, we, that's sort of the beginning of how all of a sudden that secondary air quality conversation that sort of was a consistent thing of what we could do to make improvements immediately came to the forefront and saying, okay, now we're serious. Now this is a, first level, first rate conversation, which pretty much, bumps its way in front of all the other problems and issues that you may have on campus. So that's kind of how we got to, where we were in that, what was that, March of 2020.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's how we got there.
Now, did some of the elements of what Kelly was talking about in terms of the evaluation and the evaluation process of going through and trying to pick out a particular technology or service, do those resonate with you? Well, talk about your path of deciding upon what you finally chose.
Oh, no, absolutely. Like everybody else, all of a sudden, we became little mini experts at, so many things that we had no business of being experts in, if you know what I mean. We've all gone through that with everything over the past couple of years. And so everyone really, really dug in, started reading up what was our air quality, what was it like in different buildings. We started to actually go through room by room. What was the ventilation like? What was the quality like? Luckily for us, we had in a previous construction project, we had a team come out and actually do some air quality testing in some of the rooms in some of the older buildings. And so we knew and had accurate figures of some of those. And so that was extremely helpful because then we could take those, extrapolate them, apply them to some of the other, like buildings and different things and have a general idea of where we stood. As we started looking around, obviously we ended up with becoming a surgically clean air customer. And, there's different, units out there, there's different, systems. But this was one that just resonated because they had one of the things, they had the sort of the medical background and that clientele. And so that was really important to us. They weren't just some off the shelf Best Buy Brookstone. kind of air filter that's just kind of hawked out there. It was something that was like, no, these guys are legit.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the process. Now you say you're a private school, but is this like was it a community purchase? I mean, did you go through a process where parents surveyed? Talk about how those selections were made.
So basically, at the top level, it was me and the CFO that were, really looking at the units originally. We didn't survey the parents. We didn't do too much because, as you know, you go with 600 kids, that's a lot of parents, that's a lot of opinions. And even with 170 staff members, I mean, that's a lot of people. Everybody's got an opinion,
Yeah.
So once you open that can of worms, in my world, and what we deal with, that's not a can you want to open, because that can get messy quick, and you don't want to hurt feelings, and like I said before, going back to my original comment, all of a sudden we had a lot of experts, everyone claimed, had a brother, cousin, uncle, that like, he knows what he's talking about. And it's like, yeah, I'm not buying that. So we didn't necessarily do that, but we did do all the due diligence and legwork to get up to that point. Then we have basically an admin team, which is basically, sort of the leaders of the school and, various personnel management positions that we brought it to them. And then that way we presented that. We could all talk through it and, what are our options? What are we doing? And then also, what was our budget? What did we have? And that's how we proceeded with that. So we'd done the legwork sort of behind the scenes, then brought it to a larger committee to basically, hash it out. Personally, I was already sold myself. Wasn't a complete homer. I mean, I had some questions and different things about it, but for the most part, because I had done a lot of the legwork, firsthand, I felt confident going forward and presenting it that like this was definitely something that we should do.
Sure. Let me ask you to kind of break down a day in the life for your teachers and for yourself in terms of the actual use of the purifiers in the school. I know we had mentioned in previous conversations about the number of buildings that you have, and that there's some movement that goes on through the day. So just kind of give us kind of what it feels like to be using this technology on your campus in a day-to-day setup.
It's actually really, really easy. So we went and purchased enough units so we have one in every classroom. There's also some project rooms and other rooms like that. We also purchased some units for those rooms too. So in a sense, if you're going to simplify it, every teacher has a unit in their room. And so we went and I explained how to use it. I sent, one personally went and talked to several teachers, then also sent out a mass email on like, these are how the units are. Here's the way you want them located in their room and what you could do to go and get the most out of the unit. Then the teachers, all they have to do is basically just turn them on and off. And most of the teachers were really, they were rock solid. They got it. I would probably say, there's a degree, but, almost all the teachers were very, very anxious to get them. And every single teacher we have totally loves their unit. They use it every day. And all they have to do, like I said, they come in the morning, they turn it off. And then sometimes turn it on in the morning. And then sometimes they don't even bother turning it off. And, we have a night crew that comes through and, they'll go ahead and make sure the systems are okay. They'll check them, make sure they're still working, shut them off to wait till the morning. Depending on the room, some rooms, we actually just leave them on all night long. So it just depends. We'll put them on a low setting or we'll put them on the auto mode. And so the unit just basically does itself, set it and forget it.
Nice. And as I also mentioned earlier, your particular part of the world, you have things beyond COVID to worry about when it comes to air quality. And maybe, Chris, if we could pull up the image of the Marin campus, and Brooke, you can walk us through what we're actually looking at. This is not a night shot.
Yeah, believe it or not, this is the middle of the day. And this was taken last year. As you know, I'm in Northern California, and California is always on fire at some degree. So as the fire seasons hit, and considering California has been in a drought, the air quality gets incredibly poor. And as the fires happen, it's not necessarily, people aren't so much concerned about the fire in their neighborhood, their town, but what they're really concerned about is just the air quality comes pushing through because the fires are so large. what you're looking at here, this shot was taken, I took this around 11 o'clock in the morning. And the lights are on. Most of the lights they're on came on because they're on, photocells. They came on automatically. And it's just as bad as you imagine. And it's just as bad as you can see. This was a very, very poor, quality. The haze level was low. The air quality was in the triple digits. I mean, we were just redlining on purple air and all the other, air quality meters. And, this kept going for about 3 days. And it was really nice for us because we already had the units at the school. And so we knew that from an air quality standpoint, it was okay. Shut your doors, shut your windows, turn on the purifier, and you will be fine. And outside, when you walked outside, it did smell like an ashtray. You had, ash on your car as if you had snow flurries. But when you were inside, as long as the purifier was on, you were good to go. You didn't smell, the smoke. You didn't feel like it was, a health danger in the rooms. And, it's one of the things that was kind of funny. When we first got the purifiers and I was explaining to the teachers how they worked, one of the things I did, I went over to our drama department. They have a couple of smoke machines, like fog machines that you would have. So I stole one of those, brought it over to a classroom. I had the purifier in the center of the room. So I turned on the fog machine, which basically is like distilled water and glycerin, and it makes this vapor. So I cranked that thing up all the way. Gene Simmons would have been proud. It was like a hairband concert in there. It was just full. You could barely see in the classroom because I wanted it totally full. Once I got it full, I went over, I turned the air purifier on turbo to see how well it would work because I'm just a visual guy. It's like, I need a real world study. I mean, you could throw numbers and all sorts of things at me, and I don't care what the algorithm is. It just, I don't get it. I just wanted to see how it worked. Within seconds, the room immediately started to clear. Within a minute, you could totally see. Under 5 minutes, you could not have even told that I had that room completely full of vapor. So
Wow.
to me, from like a real world study, that was, to me, I was like, okay, this thing really, really cooks when you need it to. And it just also showed the air change and how quickly it could basically change the air of that entire classroom in such a short period of time, which was definitely when I, told some teachers and I showed some teachers, I had a small video on my phone, I showed them, and I could just tell their confidence in the units just went through the roof. They were like, okay, I see what you're talking about now. Because when you don't have that, you're believing that it's moving all that air and you don't necessarily see it. So this was just a great way to show that, like, look, you can actually see it happen in real time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now we have another image up here of the devices themselves. Talk a little bit about placement in the classroom and the interaction with students. I know you said sometimes it can get a little crazy with primary school kids running around. So but talk about how safe they are while they're in there.
Well, so the main thing is that, I mean, the units they're very safe. There's nothing you can do, or a child, let's say, could do to get hurt. We found the best place to have the unit in the room is obviously in the dead center of the room, mainly because of power and other things that may not be convenient for some, may be convenient for others. It all depends on the room. I mean, I think the main thing is you don't want to just go jam it in a corner, and which it will still work in the corner. It just won't work as well because, just if you know anything about how air moves, it's like you want it more where it's going to collect the most air, which is closer to the center. So even if it has to go against a wall or something, try to pull it off the wall or whatever. In some of our lower classes, in our, kindergarten, first grade, plenty of Legos sometimes get dropped down in there. So you got to be careful. We've learned there that what we'll do with the unit is we'll actually put it up on one of the countertops or something, just so the kids can't reach up in there and drop something in. In one of our third grade classrooms, some kid dropped a pencil in there to see what would happen. That wasn't fun. So we had to fish out the pencil. It handled it. We fixed it. It was fine. But still, you definitely want to make sure, that the units are someplace where the younger kids in particular, we haven't had any issues with, any of the, the older kids, fourth grade and up and everything. And, but yeah, it's definitely something you just want to be aware of, that kids will be kids, and, they want to know once you show them that you can do the, the sensor hand wave over the top. They all think they're a Jedi and they want to wave their hand over it and turn it on and off and everything. So, but, believe it or not, most of our students, once that novelty kind of gets over, then they just understand what it is. It just becomes another piece of equipment in the room.
Right. Right. If I were in second grade, I probably thought it was a water fountain or something. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But now that you know, air purification is part of your day-to-day obligations, and it's up there as much as electricity or the internet or the plumbing. Do you see any challenges with it? I mean, what would you like to see on your wish list going forward? Are there any like next generation sort of things that you're like, wow, I really wish we could do this? Maybe in terms of, we talk about what Kelly was talking about, the level of the sound, for instance. I mean, are there things that you're looking forward to going forward?
I mean, I think one of the things, I don't particularly find the units that noisy. If they're in turbo, they're a little noisy. And so, that is something to, be aware of, but not noisy like you would expect. We have some large commercial HEPA filters we use when we do like drywall work. If we're doing, we're doing carpet work, things like that, you can take in, they're industrial, they're for construction grade. They're nowhere near the decibels of those when those things are on and they're running high. But I mean, with the units themselves, I really like them. I think they work. I mean, the sound, I could see the sound coming down. Some timer features I'd love to be able to program it. I talked to Kelly about this before. It'd be nice to be able to program it so you could have the thing automatically come on and off. That way you could sort of situate it in a room and, take the variables out, take the, the teacher out of the equation entirely, to have them turn on and off. It, doesn't have to be some weird Bluetooth thing that you control from home, just as much as you could just program it like a simple timer, almost like a Christmas tree, to come on and off when you want it to.
Yeah.
I think those type of things, those advancements I'd really like. And I think the other thing too is the units are great. Personally, I prefer the black, not that anyone's asking, but the black ones are just kind of cool. And from a small poll that I've conducted, most of the teachers think the black ones are pretty cool. So, but no, they've just, it'd be nice to see one that was possibly a little bit more rugged, I guess you say, where, possibly on wheels or something, so you could wheel it around quickly, efficiently. So then, no matter what was happening, you could just, roll it into a room if you didn't have it or whatever. I think that would be, something to, think about, look forward to. But for the most part, all the units were great and we have no problems with them.
Well, that hasn't stopped your teachers from taking it upon themselves to move them anyway, right? Talk about
the teachers will
the
move them all
room
the time.
project.
All the time, and I get teachers too. They'll say, hey, I got to take my class over here. I know there's not a unit there. Can you come move our unit? And we'll go grab it and carry it over for them and move it and, get them situated. It's the teachers really have attached themselves to them. So it's definitely something that they appreciate. They want to have with them all the time and everything. So it's not a problem at all.
Well, it really is another aspect of pandemic education now where, social emotional learning has come to the forefront. And it seems that, the first thing is, before you get into curriculums or get into literacy rates, it's about alleviating anxiety for students, making them feel safe. And not only the students, but the faculty as well. I mean, it's everyone. We're kind of experiencing this group trauma. Do you see the purification systems as something that is actually aiding in the use of education in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just to talk about just the teachers alone, just all people, and this goes across life with so many different categories. But like, when it comes to anxiety, you have people on the, they're a 10. I mean, they have a high anxiety about certain topics, and then you have people that are 1. They just don't care. Yeah. But like here, we kind of have a range, but we have some teachers that are definitely on the high scale. And man, I tell you, their anxiety came way down when, I showed them some of the tests I did. I showed them how the unit worked, explained everything, and these were the type of people, they want to know everything. They want all the details and the schematics and, how's this thing, what's the makeup and everything. And so the anxieties come way down for them, which has been very, very, it's been awesome because I'm empathetic for their concerns. I mean, I think we all were a little freaked out about a year and a half ago when this thing hit. We were just like, man, is this the end of the world kind of thing to take it to like the 9th degree? But, so there were some scares, and this this really calmed and gave a sense of calm to people. The interesting thing, like I was just telling you about the teachers, is that when, if a unit happens to, oh, my unit, usually it comes unplugged or something, they don't know, but they'll be like, my unit's not working. Oh my gosh, you need to get over here right away. You'll go over, you'll plug it in, and they're just, all of a sudden you can just see their tension just completely evaporate. And they're just like, okay, everything's good. I'm safe. I'm safe.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot of comments from parents too, where they've said that they really, really appreciate what the school's done to sort of go the extra mile and make sure that, these are in the classrooms, in how the air purification works, how are, the windows, the door situation, how's the airflow, who's where, and all that type of stuff. And so they've really, really appreciated that the school, one, made the investment, and then two, took it upon ourselves without being asked to just make sure that we had clean air in every single room on campus.
Yeah. Now, Kelly, let me ask you. I mean, Brooke's situation as a single school and with a particular sort of campus. In your experience with other maybe more traditional school setups or just different school setups, or a lot of the things that Brooke's saying, kind of what you hear around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, creating that environment of people feeling cared for, protected, sort of how I opened with, really lets them perform at their best. And, everybody needs to evaluate their situations. Older buildings, some, I think, Brooke, on your campus, there's no HVAC at all. So there's no air movement beyond the windows. And others, they might have an older system, or even the newer systems of HVAC. You're really looking at moving large volumes of air very quickly. Like the analogy I love for that one, it's like taking your car through the car wash at 60 miles an hour, right? You're going to get the big dirt off, but you're not getting it really clean. So again, looking at your HVAC system is a great start, but then what are you doing for directly in the classroom, what I call at the source, where the people are coming together, is really what we need to focus on. And then really looking to improve your air rotation, your ACH at that level, but then also what is the levels of the system that's going to be going through, like, filtration and UV and such. So yeah, all the things that Brooke had to consider. Actually, he was wonderful to work with in dialing in the needs, and he had varied needs, which was really kind of exciting for me, working on a project, with a really cool building setup. But we've seen everything over these last 20 months, and really being flexible, portable, plug and play. It allows you to go wherever you're needed. And like Brooke said, like being flexible, like say all of a sudden they did have to have a parent meeting and a bunch of parents came in, whether they use the cafeteria or a meeting room, you can actually pull a couple of different of the JADE units in from the classrooms and then have a protected environment in that special need. So it really allows you to be flexible at the source when needed to bring that protection.
Yeah. Now, Brooke, you mentioned earlier that you and the CFO were kind of the two main constituents when it came to the purchasing. Talk a little bit about how long did it take? Now, maybe because of the pandemic, things were probably accelerated along those lines too. But kind of take us through the implementation process a little bit.
Well, when it came to the timeline, one of the things is that I had seen a JADE unit before the pandemic. And so I didn't really know much about surgically clean air or anything about that, but I had seen a unit and I knew what it did. And I was looking for something that was more commercial grade and higher quality than, like I said before, just some off the shelf product. And so back in the beginning, April, May, I started to, of 2020, I started to, really start looking around, not only for the units themselves, but then there was also some other COVID related issues. And I'm it's not like I had some premonition, but I knew that everyone was going to want everything quickly. So one of the conversations I had when I sat down with Kathy, our CFO, first thing I said, look, we're not the only school. Everyone's going to be looking for, these things and others, and we need to move quicker than not. We can't do the basic, administrative task force committees, we're going to vote on it 15 times kind of thing. It's like, we need to move and get our order in if we're going to want these for the school year. And So we moved fairly fast. And like I mentioned before, we were a little bit lucky because of a couple of construction projects we were just coming out of. We'd already had some air quality tests. I already knew all the square footage of all the rooms. I already knew exactly what we needed and how. So that made that process easier. And Kelly could not have been easier to work with. You know, she had our units pretty much locked and loaded as soon as we came up with an amount, you know, a quantity, I should say, of how many we needed and everything. And we were just right in there and got in the queue quickly. And a lot of that was driven just, you know, I was talking about anxiety earlier. That was my own anxiety, thinking that like I didn't want egg on my face and have, you know, school come around and get started. And we didn't have the units because they were still on back order. And we all know right now with the whole supply chain thing across the country and everything else that's on back order right now. Well, it was sort of, I felt the same thing with those units, you know, a year and a half ago. So we needed to get in. And sure enough, I mean, they got here. They actually were delivered, I think, Kelly, I think it was like 2 weeks before they were actually even supposed to get here. So that was good to know and good to see. So, but yeah, so that's kind of how that took place.
Right.
But you know, I can't speak for Surgically Clean Air now as far as the units availability, but you know, I do say once you've done your due diligence, once you know you're going to do it, I would make a decision, pull the trigger. You know, it's kind of one of those things, fish or cut bait. It's like, yeah, you want to get out there and start fishing and go and get it moved so you can get those in your spaces.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing I was going to ask you when you saw our poll results. Oh, by the way, our second poll results were pretty evenly split across the board to where schools felt that they had a good level of air quality versus, you know, actually a third, and a third, to where they were not so happy about it to where they were pretty pleased about it. So we have a pretty spread out audience here. And again, I encourage our audience to, if you have a question for Brooke or Adelia or Kelly, to please, you know, put them in the chat. We have some time here where we can talk about those things. But in the meantime, 60% of the folks online with this right now really haven't considered changing an air system or even kind of considered that. What would be those first steps that you would recommend to someone who's now interested in looking to implement these technologies?
I think one of the first steps is you really need to evaluate your property and your campus and see, you know, what your needs are specifically. I mean, I think you need to sit down. Like for me, I had literally gone through every single classroom, every room, who was in it, how many kids were in it, how many times a day they're going to be in it. And I evaluated the situation. You know, it goes back to the question we said before about, you know, how many people did we involve in the decision? I tried to eliminate as many people as possible so I could get the information myself, as opposed to, you know, start bringing in other people. Sometimes that just can complicate things, especially in the beginning. So I had a really, really good idea and a matrix that I created of, you know, all the classrooms, all the spaces, the teachers, the amount of kids who would be in, and sort of those safety factors that we were looking for. So that's why we could quickly come up with how many units do we need to spread out across campus. And, you know, and then I'll obviously, you know, start talking about air changes and air movements, the, you know, the cubic square footages of the classrooms. I got all of those in there also, because that was important, because I didn't want a placebo effect where it's like you take a JADE unit and you put it in a gymnasium and yeah, it's going to work. It's going to do something, but in a gymnasium, the unit's a little small, you know, and that says nothing against the JADE unit. It's just like, come on, you might as well just take it and put it outside and then expect it to clean the campus. That's right. Not going to work, you know.
Physics.
So yeah, yes, just really simple. So I think that's one of the first things I'd say is just to get a really good handle on what you're looking for in all the various rooms and how you would do it and how you would place it. And so that's one of the things that we did. And then also the last thing you want is to, you know, you don't want to, this just comes down to, you know, logistics and finances. You don't want to get a unit that goes in a room and then nobody uses that room. And you're like, why did we buy a unit for this? And we actually, because we had so many classrooms, there were a couple that we actually relocated not because we got it wrong, but because things changed as school started. We actually moved some classrooms from different spaces, just basically based on the airflow of that room. And we thought, hey, this class should be in this bigger room. And so we took some project rooms that are a little bit larger, turned them into an actual, you know, full-time classroom, And then, the smaller classrooms made those just projects rooms or storage or whatever we were using it for. So it's just those type of things. You just try to plan ahead. So when you do make your, when you pull the trigger, make your purchase, you got everything dialed in.
Right.
Brooke, if I recall too, I think you guys sort of evolved, like you started off with your first batch. And I think your acceptance was pretty high with both your teachers and then also the students via the parents and that type of feedback. And then you guys grew with it from there. And I must say that I see that quite often. I had one school system in the Boston area that started off with just the nurses stations, right? So they went for that critical care area and just did nurses stations. But again, the positive feedback and the positive energy that was created by that, I mean, you can see it on people's faces right now with the critical levels. And from there, they grew into other areas. So I think you guys had a similar experience.
Yes, we had I don't remember the exact quantities, but like we basically made a purchase, and then as things got going and we morphed, there were other areas that were like, you know what, it would make sense to have these in these areas. We'll call them like sort of a B grade area, and it just made sense. We should have one in there too, and all the different things tie in with the anxiety of faculty, staff, and everything. It's like we had a conference room, and I was like, I'm not putting one in the conference room. I'm not. And sure enough, that was one of the rooms that ended up with one. So in the beginning, I was like, we don't need one in there. And then, we ended up needing one in there. And actually, I think that unit gets used probably the most because that conference room has been sort of a revolving door of not only just certain people, but a whole slew of people have come through that use that room throughout the day. So that's a type of room that, people are really glad it's in there because they're like, hey, I'm only going to be in here for an hour, but I don't know who was in here before me. So I really, really like the fact that unit's in here, basically cleaning it out before I even walk in the room. So yeah, those type of things and those type of different classrooms and spaces you morph into.
That's great. Brooke, maybe we could talk a little bit about the financial side of things, where it was, you were talking about the budgets before. Is this now something that's an ongoing part of your budgetary, or is this kind of like a one-time purchase? How does that work into your strategy in terms of keeping the systems updated and in place? And
so now I put that it's in my budget. It's a line item in my budget. Not necessarily new units, but definitely, filter replacements. You got the HEPA filter, the carbon filter, UV light, all that type of stuff. And so UVC light. And so those are things now I put in my budget so we can go ahead and make sure that those are replaced, cleaned, working properly and everything. So that's just something that you just have to sort of, just like any other piece of equipment that you would have on campus. It'd just be like an HVAC unit. That's how I look at it. You're going to change the filters in there, several times, and depending on your unit and the degree of your HVAC unit, it's just something that you just do. So it's a budget line item we just put in there. That's something that we just planned for, and we have it now. We'll probably have it for quite some time.
yeah, and Kelly, what are your recommendations when it comes to those sort of things? Is there a horizon for mean time between failures with J units? Talk about your suggestions for people, other district administrators or educators who are looking to.
Right. And again, I've seen everything sort of like this emergency need came about with COVID. Like I think even with Brooke's situation, like air purification had been on their agenda for a year or two, but then it came to the top of the agenda with a crazy year. And so with that, I think that some people had planned budgeting for, school improvements. But what I found is a lot of schools went into like either special need or special category, or Brooke, I'm not sure what you guys called it, to move it up to a faster pace so it didn't have to go through the regular channels. What did you guys call it, Brooke, when it came to that quick action?
I basically turned it into like a health category in the sort of facility maintenance, campus operations, where with air quality and such, it's just sort of a catch-all. So anything that has to now do with the classrooms and, not only the quality of air, but just, everything else that goes into a classroom, if you have any sort of like, basic cleaning, abatement, anything like that, sort of falls into that bucket. And that's what this falls into now, because this is sort of like, hey, this is an ongoing process. One of the things as we come out of this, I think that's going to be important is that, and again, things, go up and down. But one of the things is, I think just as a society, everyone's a little bit more aware of the quality of their environment, no matter what that is. We all know now that, like, hey, it's open your window. Don't be a troll and sit in this like windowless room and in the dark. It's like, no, you need fresh air. You need that air change. You need to know what's going on for your own personal health. Not just because it's like, it's kind of stale in here, but like you may have some viruses in there that you probably don't want. So that's just something that we've done now. And with all the teachers, staff, everybody, that's something that we're a lot more aware of. And it's something that I work on a regular basis. We have some rooms that have, they have radiant floors. So they do not have HVAC units in there. Northern California, air conditioning is not a huge thing. There's only a few spaces on our campus that have air conditioning units. And so because of that, I've been looking at those classrooms and how I can turn the air over even more with the Jade units. And so, I've been looking at different, exhaust fans and ceiling fans and, rooftop units and everything. So just to bring more fresh air in, even with the Jade unit in there. So it's just one of those things that I think going forward that it's going to be a constant thing that we look at on how to upgrade, especially older structures that are aging out, things that were built in the 60s and 70s where, that type of science and technology wasn't really looked at back then. We think it was, but when you look at it compared to today's buildings and the different things that we have and the air changes and everything, it just wasn't there. So I think in a way for the health of all of us, I think it's been, one of those, it's a silver lining in a, pandemic that hasn't been very fun.
Yes.
That's
I've
for
received
sure.
all sorts of feedback. It was quite nice. Like during, 2020, it was pretty intense. And, I was dealing with a lot of people that had a high level of need and their anxieties were high in trying to get these machines as quickly as possible. But with that, the nice thing is I also received a lot of thank you letters, and one of them was like, thank you, Kelly, for dialing us in the way that you have. Not only did we not have a single case or outbreak of COVID in our school, but also reduced levels of stomach flu, strep throat, all other colds and flus. He said, as a result, we've had the healthiest year we've ever had in the history of the school. So this is really impressive that, like, again, COVID has brought the awareness to the level we are now. But again, what goes into our body and then affects us down to the cellular level to our cognitive capabilities, which are so important in schools. This is really, really important to a point that at Harvard University here had created a study, and it wasn't on any particular company, but the title was Pure Air Makes You Smarter. So, everything like down to the yoga breath, right? And it re-energizes the body, but it also re-energizes the cognitive capabilities. So just adding to the win-win-win factor here, right? True scientific protection, reduction of fears and anxieties, but then also you're increasing the oxygen intake and the overall wellness of your body and therefore brain. So yeah, it's, I find myself talking more like, because we're all kind of tired of talking about this pandemic, but talking about just overall health and wellness, including the mental aspect into that, but then also long range, like what this means for the benefit of the school and the positive word of mouth. And then also, faculty that they want to be part of this, and also word of mouth from parent to parent.
Yeah. No, I knew the toughest part of my job this afternoon would be to end the conversation. There's so much, there's so much to talk about. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure the audience knows that if you would like a free 30-minute one-on-one meeting with an air purification specialist like Kelly, or a virtual demo of the product that Brooke installed in his school, you should type yes and send it in the chat. And make sure you send it to, with your name, and so it's not anonymously, so the folks at Trax can pick you up and help you make that happen. But in the few minutes we have left, I usually like to wrap things up. We've already started, Kelly, with the glass half full there, that there are a lot of innovations that have come out of what we've been dealing with, specifically when it comes to the awareness of air quality. What's your crystal ball say? I mean, is this something that you believe is going to stick around once we hopefully get back to some new kind of normal?
Yeah, you know, what the new normal is going to be interesting to see. I mean, a lot of people think this will be another element to the cold and flu season, as we see the different variants and how things settle in and the vaccination rate and the effectiveness and all of that. But I think the key takeaway from COVID is the awareness. You know, again, like I used to have to talk about the other things that we need to think about of the risk factors of indoor and outdoor air quality, but specifically on the indoor air quality. And now I think people as a whole, the awareness is there. And I think that's going to stay within them, not only for our generation, but, you know, my daughter's 13 and she's very aware of this as she wears a mask to school every day. She's going to grow up with the knowledge of this, which will be then passed down to stories she shares with her children as well. So I think this has had an overall shift in the way people view the air they breathe.
Yeah, and Brooke, how about yourself? I mean, you see, looking out in the next 3 or 4 years, I'm assuming this is something that's now going to be stitched into your utilities every day going forward.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely going to be something that's just, you know, it's just commonplace now. It's gonna take years for things to change and attitudes to change. But I think, like I mentioned before, I think a lot of it's for the better. I think all of us, even in our own personal home lives, or, you know, you're more aware, a little bit cleaner, you know. Yeah, sure, you're not bringing the groceries home and wiping them down with Clorox wipes and everything else like we were in the beginning. You know, luckily we're not doing any of that. But definitely you understand your environment a lot more. And I think that's something that's going to stay. And here at the school, I definitely think it's something that's here to stay, because I think now it's just more of an expectation that I think people expect things to be safe and clean, especially from things that, you know, sights unseen and things that, like viruses, that you're not aware of. So I think that's pretty much what's going to happen. It's just going to be part of the budget. You know, one of the things you asked earlier, just to circle back really quick, is you asked about budgeting for the units and things. One thing that I'm bummed out about, and only because of my background, is that we purchased all these Jade units, and unfortunately their life cycles are now on the same exact cycle. So that's the one thing I'm not excited about, is, you know, not everything lives forever. So when it comes to replacement, even though I'm sure they'll have better units out, I have a lot of units that are going to age pretty much at the same time. So that's something I'm going to have to definitely budget for in the future.
Absolutely. And Odelia, let's leave you with the last word. I mean, Trox is just a premium provider of all sorts of technologies for schools. Air purification, I'm sure, and even in years past, was an element, but I don't know if anybody was predicting a global pandemic as a part of a school solution. But can you look at where you see these sort of technologies in your portfolio and how they're going to affect districts going forward?
Absolutely. I mean, sadly, it took the pandemic to bring this to the forefront. And there's nothing more important than health and safety by far, right? So again, we wouldn't drink a dirty glass of water. If you saw brown water from your tap, there's no way you would drink that. So right now, what the pandemic has brought forward, and that's just like Brooke had even said, and Kelly as well, it's here to stay. Air quality, indoor air quality, that we just never really, I mean, we've taken it for granted, right? So right now, this is something that we're quite aware of, and we need to do something to just improve it for our own for our own sanity, for our own health, and our children's and staff, right? So thank you for bringing that forward though, Kevin. And just, I know, being cognizant of time, I just want to thank everyone for their time. And there was a lot of information and some great conversations. And thank you again, Brooke, for making this all so much more insightful. And I just want to add is that we're here to help. So I am going to send some resources and a link to my calendar so you can book some time with me. And again, I'm very happy to connect with you, have a one-on-one conversation on air quality or any larger health and safety challenge that you may be facing. And thank you again. And I'm really looking forward to chatting with you all soon.
Great.
Bye,
Well,
everyone.
Odelia, thanks. And
Thank you.
Brooke and Kelly, thank you as well. It's just a really great conversation. If you submitted a question that we didn't get to in the Q&A portion, as Odelia said, someone will be following up with you directly. Once again, I'd like to thank our presenters for a very informative presentation And I'd like to thank you for joining us as well. As a reminder, you'll get an email within the next few days that contains a link to this recording along with the slides. Thanks again for participating and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.